Welcome to another LinkedIn Live with with Alexandra Panaretos this week. Well, let me start over. I should just redo that one. I can always edit out. All right, welcome to another live session for our security awareness community. I'm really excited this week to be hosting Alexandra Panaretos, and we will be covering, the areas of managing human risk. Um, Alexandra, would you please just introduce yourself and we'll just go from there?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I have been working in the human cyber risk space for about the last 13 years. I was
Mhm.
privileged to work with the US military as one of the partners with military spouses and families, and was really blessed to work with the operations security team, where I learned
Okay.
so much about the offline behaviors and different cues that people need to protect their own
Mhm.
information. And this was, a
Cool.
decade and a half ago as social media started coming up. I've worked as a consultant for the last 8, working with all kinds of companies, different sizes, different geographies, different cultures. And one thing seems to stay the same, and that's people. So I am
Yeah.
the people person in the cyber team. So really looking forward to chatting about human risk today.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. And yes, I'm really excited. For those who may not be familiar, Alexandra also has a great talk she did with SANS at their summit last year that you can also find on their website. And I'll also include a link in our write-up that we'll do also after this talk and include that as well. What we were talking about, before was, about what's the difference? There's security awareness programs and people have got them. We're slowly making a shift, right? From let's do training once a year and we can check it off to now people are starting to go, okay, I need to, make this more of a thing. This needs to be a little more of a, more regular training and education. We have our phishing sims, we have our videos maybe once a quarter or something a little more often. But now there's more and more focus on the human aspect and risk. So I know you talk about managing human risk. So what's the difference between having a security awareness program viewpoint and mentality and having, understanding it as we're managing human risk?
Sure. So awareness was misnamed from the start. And there's always been a lot of confusion, a lot of misconceptions about what security awareness is. Security
Mhm.
awareness as a whole was intended to make people aware of the threats and the risks that they face living and working in a digital world. What
Mhm.
it has become and is evolving from was more of a compliance driven exercise where we had the annual training, we have the phishing assessments, and it seems to have been mostly based in knowledge transfer. We are going to push
Mhm.
all of this information at you in the hopes that you will now behave differently. We
Mhm.
know that's not the case. When you look at people, process, technology, people of that triad had been ignored for many, many years. And unfortunately, due to the pandemic, when everything got pushed to more of a remote work environment, companies really had to stop and focus on that people element as a huge part of their security. So managing human risk isn't necessarily looking at what people know, but looking at what people do, because there is often a disconnect. We all know we should be eating better. We all know we should be exercising more. But do we always do it? Not necessarily. And so when you take what people do, along with the processes, the technology, the tooling that are involved in an organization, it's looking at where in a process, where in a situation is a risk of compromise or a threat most present? Where is that
Mhm.
moment where things can be fine or things can go very, very wrong? And address that risk. Is it something that is controlled solely by what someone does or does not do? And that's where awareness is shifting to, is looking at where in business operations, where in information technology, in privacy, in data loss prevention, where do people have the most impact on the overarching security of an organization, and let's minimize that risk where we can. It's not so much pushing knowledge at people, but streamlining human behavior instead of fighting against that tide.
Hmm. It almost reminds me of like kind of looking at your processes and automating where you can automate,
Mhm.
right? And kind of taking certain elements out of it so that you don't have to bang your head every time
Mhm.
for X activity. Um, we're kind of looking at, just like you said, the whole picture.
Mhm. Where can you
Um,
remove that element of choice? If
right.
I go left, if I go right, have you designed something so that I'm only allowed to point back to the center? And that's
Hmm.
where it's sometimes difficult for technologists to wrap their head around this, is because there is no two people on earth who behave the exact same way moment to moment. So it can be very
Right.
overwhelming.
Right. No, for sure. So can you give us an example of kind of what this would look like, in practical application?
Sure. So we had a client that I was working with in their accounts payable department, and that
Hmm.
is, as we know, ripe for compromise. And this particular company had a phenomenal training around a callback procedure. That was one of their main controls. And they had great training on it. It was well known. People were supposed to do it, but yet they were still finding a lot of fraudulent activity and they couldn't figure out why. So we came in, we sat with them. Obviously, this is pre pandemic, and watched how people in the department were working truly. And they would get the change notification out of their queue. They would move into the screen, they would change what they needed to change, and they would move on to the next one, almost getting into an autopilot routine where you just weren't thinking, you just were doing. And then we stopped and we asked them, at what point do you do the callback procedure? And you could see a visceral reaction of, oh goodness, I have completely forgotten about that. And then as soon as they
Wow.
were prompted, they started doing it on every single one. And so
Hmm.
we looked at, again, where was that moment that these accounts were most ripe for compromise? And so in the software package that they were using for this, we figured out that it was the account numbers and the routing numbers that were most sensitive to the fraud that was happening. So if
Hmm.
anyone clicked in an account number field, if anyone clicked in that routing number field, there was a pop-up that happened. Have you made vocal contact with the account owner? Yes or no? You could
Right.
click yes or you could click no. If you clicked yes, another field popped up. Who did you talk to? When did you talk to them? Did they approve the change that's on the ticket? Fill it
Hmm.
out, go make your changes as normal, continue. If you hit no, it took you back to the face sheet or that main screen of the account and said, please make vocal contact with account owner before proceeding. So you
Cool.
physically stopped someone from going
Hmm.
on autopilot because there was that behavior prompt. There was no
Right.
additional training. There was no additional, hours worth of ask for someone to do. But in
Hmm.
that moment where the risk was most present, there was a prompt to have a certain behavior, a certain action. And in doing
Wow.
that, following it through about 12 months, because of that very simple change, and it was just a request to the software provider, it was not anything Herculean, they stopped
Uh-huh.
14 account compromises
How
through
many?
that process, just by building in a behavior prompt for something that should have already been happening. But because people are tired, people get busy, people just want to clear that queue, they
Right.
were just forgetting. It wasn't malicious.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it was something so simple.
Mhm.
Um, that's all it took.
Yeah.
Right. As opposed to having like that knowledge transfer, right? And you can, beat them over the head with it over and
Mhm.
over, saying, you've got to do this. And they're saying, yes, I know. I think that's a really fascinating example.
Mhm.
Um, I think that's really great. Thank you. Um, and so when if a company is like looking to just get started, right? They're looking to kind of
Mhm.
shift how they approach, doing security awareness and really trying to integrate it right into all the
Mhm.
processes and really making it more of a risk assessment and making it part of that.
Mhm.
How would you recommend them to get started? A lot of our companies, they have, or, not our companies, a lot of the security awareness professionals
Mhm.
in our community, they're either smaller teams or, they could be enterprise. So we kind of have
Mhm.
a little bit of everything. What would you recommend for people getting started?
The first step is to know your organization. How many
Mhm.
people do you have? Are they all working on a particular schedule? Are there multiple shifts? Are there different? Job roles. Are you geographically dispersed? Really get to know your organization.
Right.
A lot of times, enterprise risk, there is always a risk person somewhere. They may sit in legal, they may sit in audit. It just depends how your company's structured, but find your
Right.
risk person and ask them, what are the largest risks? What are the largest threats facing our organization? And
Hmm.
take that list back and look at how many correlate to people's behavior.
Okay.
Nothing else. What could
Right.
someone have a significant impact on? And then once you
Hmm.
get that built out, go talk to your security team. If you have a SOC or whoever your cyber threat intel person is, go
Hmm.
talk to them and say, what are we seeing as far as threats and risks that are facing our organization? And they're going to have a pretty good idea of what they're seeing a lot of. Obviously, we know phishing is going to be number one for the most part. That's a
Right.
known, it's always going to be there.
Right.
But what else is happening? Are we having issues with badging and it's a physical access issue? Is it
Hmm.
we're having a lot of people printing at home and we're losing control of that offline information? What is happening in the organization? This is where you have to personalize it to what you are dealing with. And
Right.
then look at, how do we communicate with our people? Do we do it in different ways? Do we have a visual element? Do we have, the email or the newsletter or whatever it is? Are you completely virtual? Are you hybrid? Are you
Hmm.
in a secured environment? These are all going to look very, very different. So the first piece of the homework is know your organization very, very well. Do not be afraid to go to talk to people in different roles. If you're not
Hmm.
sure who to talk to, if you don't have uh, a great relationship with a lot of the middle managers in various different areas, talk with someone in HR and say, this is who I need to talk to. This is the plan that I have. Who would you recommend that I speak with? And it might
Hmm.
be an employee relations person. It might be that you go into the factory each shift and just see how people work, if that's
Right.
where you're at. And then from there, look to see, how do I reach the people where they are? If you're virtual,
Right.
how do I get their attention over the rest of all of the other distractions that are happening at home or wherever they may be working? If they are within the building, where is real estate within the building where I can put messaging that's, one, not expected, but
Hmm.
two, people will see almost subliminally,
Right.
where they see it every single day and they can't do anything about it. Um,
Right.
we had one company where we put giant stickers on the floor
Oh, really?
because it was unexpected. And so people would come up the stairs out of the entryway, and here's
Oh,
this
yeah.
giant graphic on the floor, and people would always look down, what's this? And so every
Oh,
quarter they
wow.
would change it. In one manufacturing environment, we put in giant red letters by the door where everyone left, did you log out of the machine you logged into today?
Hmm.
Very simple. But
Right.
because it was right there before someone left the building, every day we would watch, somebody would double back. It's almost like, did I forget to turn
Hmm.
the stove off? Let me just go double
Right.
check.
Right.
But you have to meet people where they are and
Hmm.
realize it's not necessarily making people know more, but working with the behaviors that are present and the behaviors that need to happen to minimize impacts of those threats and risks.
Right. Well, that's great. And those are really great examples too, creative that you wouldn't necessarily think of. Because we can all become blind to, something we see every day that's on the bulletin board with a bunch of other flyers. But so I really like that, doing the unexpected and
Mhm.
placing it in those unexpected locations. Um, Thank you, James, Gabriel, for joining us. And there's a LinkedIn user. I'm not able to view your name, but thank you guys for joining us. One user commented that he's been asking the question about what point you nudge when it comes to a phishing attack. So he really appreciated the example you gave
Yeah.
for the prompts. Okay, so we talked about kind of how to get started, kind of
Mhm.
where to think and where to go. And you even talked a little bit about enable.
Mhm.
How do we help employees? So what about like executing? How do we integrate it more into the regular life cycle?
You have conversations with your business. Do
Just
you do you
keeping the conversation
understand?
going.
Yeah, do you understand how your business works? Do you know when the busy season is? Do you know if
Hmm.
there's a particular time of day that is very
Right.
chaotic? understand the
Right.
business. And that is a disconnect where a lot of security teams struggle is they think they know
Mm.
what's important to the business. They think they know how the business actually operates.
Right.
Um, when in reality, when we start doing tool rationalization or we start looking at, network activity, all of a sudden we find something, some piece of software or some activity we didn't know about. Why is
Mhm.
that happening? What are people looking outside and downloading their own software because we're not able to provide that? What's that use case that we're missing?
Mm.
It can be as simple as knowing if we have to upgrade a system, what's the most convenient time to take your particular factory system X offline? And when you have that relationship and that line of communication with the business, almost instantaneously, you'll see things start to improve because now you've opened that channel of communication to
Mhm.
where the businesses can say, business units, excuse me, you all are making life very difficult because we have to sign on 3 different times to get this particular piece of something done. Is there
Right.
something different than we can do? The security team will then hear this is a particular frustration. Is there something we can do better? If there isn't, that line of communication of the why. There is
Mm.
X compliance issue, there is X governmental regulation, there is a privacy concern that we have. This is why we have to do this. Let's see
Mhm.
how we can work together to find a comparable solution. Um,
Right.
it really does, it's relationships across the business, and you can't assume what the other side of that coin is looking for.
Right. And yeah, it's amazing. It always comes down to just having those conversations and keeping that two-way, conversation flowing between everyone because we don't know what we don't know,
Mhm.
from both the security team side and from the business side. Um, and it's really just trying to get people at the table, right? And having people talking. Um, so, with so a lot of these things, some things are tangible that we can say, we did X and now we see an improvement, like the example you gave. Um, but, what about measuring in other ways? Sometimes it can be very intangible to try to measure, the growth or improvement of your efforts. So when you're looking at managing risk and, if you're having an impact, how do you manage that with or measure that, with some things that are a little more and harder to track data-wise.
Engagement is a great thing to look at. It's are people being proactive and reaching out to the security teams before bringing on a new vendor if a particular process doesn't exist at your organization?
Mm.
Is it, you know, we're asking, hey, can you teach us more about this particular topic? Around the holidays, we had one client where they started noticing kind of an uptick to their Q&A mailbox about how do I
Mhm.
secure devices for my children? So the security team
Okay.
did a webinar on here's all of the privacy settings you don't realize you need to check. And it was one of their
Right.
most well attended because they
Mhm.
listened to what people were asking for.
Right.
But there
Right.
again,
We hear that a lot.
you have to have a culture, and people toss this culture word around in a lot of different ways. But does
Mhm.
your organization give people permission to ask the question?
Mhm.
And that's
Right.
something that I pose to leadership, both in the security teams and in the business units is, are people allowed to ask? Are people allowed to say, I may have done this incorrectly?
Mm.
Could you
Right.
verify?
That's
Could
big.
you tell me the right way to do this? I'm not sure if this is an issue. Because for so long, and when I talk to people in different organizations, how do you feel about your security team? What do you think here? Far and away, key themes are I'm made to feel ignorant when I ask the question. So you have to be mindful that this is not everyone's first language as how to live and
Right.
operate in a digital world. Two, company culture is very punitive. You're not going
Mhm.
to get people coming to you proactively to look for solutions, to let you know about problems if they are fearful of what's going to happen to them for doing so. And then you have to look at, are we really listening to the feedback that we're getting? Have we provided a feedback channel for people to tell us,
Mhm.
yes, we love this, or no, this training was a waste of time. I don't know why I took it. You have to listen. People will tell you exactly what they think, what they found value in.
Yes.
You have to listen. And so many times we as security professionals struggle with getting out of our own way. So
Right.
just look at engagement. Are people
Mhm.
interacting with your team? That's a
Right.
great, tangible, metricable situation.
Do you I like that word. Do you, like, how do you convey that though to board members, right? Because a lot of times the board or the executive team that, they want numbers, they understand, like the bottom line. So, what would you encourage people who are trying to present and show, their impact in terms of that, business people can understand,
Mhm,
um, that's what would you encourage there for them? Because, just saying we have more people engaging, that's a good thing. We
mhm.
understand the value of it, but, maybe the board team may not. So how would that present for when they're looking to, show and ask for more for their programs?
So one of my favorite win themes for talking with leadership of any level is we can't protect against what we don't know. And
Mhm.
we don't know if the conversations aren't happening. So there
Mm,
again, it's showing, and a
right.
lot of these are metrics you can pull right now. How
Mhm.
many business units, how many hits to our mailbox, whatever your communication channel is, what have those looked like for the last 6 months? What is the intranet
Okay.
page to the security team? How many hits are
Right.
we getting? Are
Right.
we, look at help desk tickets,
Mhm.
the triage. What are people calling in about? What are we
Right.
seeing repetitive needs for? Is it people forgetting passwords? Is it people getting locked out? Whatever it is, look at that trending data and
Mhm.
pull that point in time. Then
Right.
start your outreach. Do not start with training. This is one of those perception is reality for your business audience. Do not start
Mhm.
this with training. Start it with a conversation. We know that now we are living in a digital world. 50% of our lives or more lives in our pocket. That is very
Right.
hard. It's very hard for people to draw a tangible association to threats and risks on a device when they don't see what's happening after a click, when they don't feel
Mhm.
primal instinct of something is wrong.
Right.
So start with the outreach of what would you like to know? What do you have questions about? We're here to help. And it's not always about policy, it's not always about process. Ask people, what do you want to know about how to live and work safely with all of
Mhm.
these digital threats that are out there? Because people are hearing
Right.
about it on the news, people are talking about it at school, children in social media. It's a great topic
Right.
to bring up.
It
When
really is. And oh, go ahead.
no, please.
Go ahead. Sorry. No, I was just gonna say, what I found just in my grassroots kind of, community advocacy with security awareness as I learned, because I'm not technical, and I've, being in the space of cybersecurity, I've started going, oh, we need to help up our game. So
Mhm.
one of the things I did was I opened up a local WhatsApp group here in Israel. They operate on WhatsApp. I think the country might like implode if they didn't have it. But so I just sent out to my some of my local women's groups and community groups and said, hey, if you want to join this quiet group, I'll share a tip once or twice a week, something simple. And I didn't know how many would join, and like within a day I had like 90 people sign up. And it
Mhm.
was just like, oh, people want to know. We just don't know where to start. And it's overwhelming, for us non-technical people. I include myself in that. And, so providing just even that open door, so many people are just willing to walk through it if you'll just let them know it's there. So I think that's a really good point. Just having the conversation, um,
So
for
something
sure.
I want to change real quick because you also mentioned it twice. I want people to stop using this. I'm technical. I'm not a technical person.
Okay.
Anyone right now who has the ability to log on to any device is a technical resource. Just because you don't know how to build the computer does not necessarily
Mhm.
mean that you don't know how to use it. And
That's great.
so much of this is psychology. If you say,
Hmm.
I'm not a security person, I'm not technical, how much of your life right now is done in a digital space?
Hmm.
Think
Yeah,
about that.
that's a good point.
How much of your children's lives, your parents' lives, everyone you know is done in
Hmm.
a digital space? You are technical. You
Right.
haven't learned the nuances to how to protect yourself. And that's where
Hmm.
security teams can really build a lot of great positive momentum quickly, is just
Hmm.
making themselves available, making the department as a whole approachable. Uh,
Hmm.
for a lot of the world, we're coming into a beautiful season of spring and summer. If you have the ability to go out and be amongst your people, go put a table out where everyone eats lunch. Ask us anything. Have open office hours on the web for those who are virtual. Um,
Right. That's
One of
great.
my favorites is First Fridays. Every first Friday of the month, the security team is going to have online office hours from 12 to 2, and we're also going to be at X location. Do you have questions
Cool.
about a device? Do you have questions about how to use social media? Come ask us.
Wow.
Almost like a professor at a university. And
No,
you
that's
just
great.
build that rapport. There's no cost involved with it. If you want to have
Hmm.
some tchotchkes or swag to hand out, that's great, but it's not a need. You're just
Right.
building that relationship. So then you can learn what people are asking about, learn what different risks or threats might be out there that you aren't aware of until you talk
Hmm.
to people. And then you take
Right.
that and you take it back to your board and say, here's the conversations we've had over the last 6 months. And these are the themes that have emerged. These are the risks, the threats, the tooling that we need to have for this type of impact. Tell your story, the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, the how. If you can
Hmm.
tell a story around what you're doing, leadership will buy in, but they need to understand the context of it.
Right. Oh, that's really great. That's I think really fabulous. And I appreciate that little change in nuance of perspective. So thank you. I think that's definitely a good perspective to share with people too, because one of the things I've been learning too is when you empower people to make them feel like they do have a control, right? That the hacker won't, it's not like they're the poor, individual against the almighty hacker. We
Mhm,
do have abilities to take control. And even if we accidentally click, right, we can proactively go to the security team and say,
mhm,
hey, so they can mitigate it faster. And so I think, just those little shifts in mindset helping the end user to understand that. And, so helping change that language, I think is
mhm.
really powerful. So thank you. Thank you for adding that insight. We are getting close to our time. So I just wanted to ask, if you had any other like tips that you would just like final thoughts to leave with our community, who's maybe kind of rethinking of how they look at their security awareness program to really kind of shift that perspective. What would you want them to take away?
So a couple things. Number one, training does have its place, but that should not be the backbone of your program. That should be a
Hmm.
supporting element. Communication and outreach is where human risk thrives. Because again, if you don't know, you can't do anything about it.
Hmm.
Language choice matters. Again, going back to psychology, we took a poster where we said, the standard phishing report at X. If you see suspicious activity, report at X.
Hmm.
The only word we changed on there was instead of report, we put notify.
Hmm.
And we had a substantial uptick in activity. Because
Wow.
when you tell someone we need you to report something, there is an intrinsic response of this feels very official. Is this
Right.
something worth reporting?
Hmm.
Am I going to get someone in trouble? Is this going to come back on me? Whereas, hey, can you just let us know if this is happening? Just notify us. Um, all of those different things. Um, it's a perception change. And all of a sudden, you've taken it from
Right.
this very severe report to, hey, just let us know. And then we can
Right.
take and run from there. I'm seeing in the chats the funny memes. Use
Yes, I was about to ask.
Please use humor. Obviously, know your audience, do your own research, know culturally what is appropriate, both from a worldview as well as corporate culture. But
Right.
one of my favorites is finally, here's something security wants you to click on. We poke fun at ourselves. And
Right.
people, once they realized it wasn't a trick, that's when they started going to the internet page more and more. And so some of the memes that I post on LinkedIn come from those where it's, life is so serious in so many different ways that we've forgotten how to just crack a smile sometimes, especially,
Absolutely.
we cannot be seen as this enforcement activity. Yes, we
Mhm.
are, but we're people too. And
Mhm.
that human element, that humor in life really can help build a bridge to communication. It just makes people realize like, oh, they have a sense of humor about this as well. So as usual, communication, building
Mhm.
trust, and really listening are going to be what makes a human risk program thrive and succeed over their traditional awareness and focus on training program.
Oh, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for, taking the time and sharing, such great insights with our community. For those of you who don't know, we do have a weekly virtual meetup every week on Thursdays at 11:30 Eastern. If you'd like to join, it's open to anyone in the security awareness profession, and just send me a DM, and I will, get you hooked up. And we also have, these live streams we do a few times a month. So, and we will send out a recap. So you can be following me or DM me if you want to make sure you get that. Or you can sign up to our community newsletter on Wizer, and I'll add that link in a moment. So thank you again, Alexandra, so much for sharing your insights, and please connect with her if you're not already. And we'll see you next time.